I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. We are learning some new details now about two deadly mass shootings. One person was killed and several injured at a church in Southern California on Sunday. Investigators say the shooter was taken down and tied up by church members until police arrived. That happened just one day after what investigators call a racist hate crime at a Buffalo supermarket. An 18-year-old suspect is now in custody after police say he opened fire on mostly black employees and shoppers, killing 10 people and wounding 3 others. And as the community mourns those 10 lives lost, we're learning some new information about the suspect. Police say he had a racist agenda and had previously posted extremist views online. ABC's Aaron Katersky joins me live from Buffalo, New York, with more on that. Aaron, what evidence do police have about his motive right now?
His motive seemed evident. The authorities uncovered a 180-page screed that is filled with white supremacist rhetoric and conspiracy theories, and a belief that somehow the suspect was on a mission to protect America from being taken over by blacks, Jews, immigrants, and other minority groups. He seemed to see it as his mission to try and stop that. And so the 180-page document includes a full and thorough detail of his plan of attack to come here to this supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood here on the east side of Buffalo and open fire and then kill as many black people as he possibly could before he intended to surrender. All the while, he said he wanted to live stream this, casting himself as something of a hero of the movement. Police have been digging into all of this digital evidence, looking at all of these writings. There are multiple posts on Facebook and YouTube and other social media outlets, and they are finding that he was radicalized online and came to internalize the increasing amount of white supremacist rhetoric that experts say is flourishing on social media.
And Aaron, investigators have spoken to the gunman's parents. Have they been able to shed any more light on this?
We're not sure that they have. They're apparently as shocked as the rest of us are about this massacre here in Buffalo. They live about 3.5 hours away. We've seen police at the family home. When we went there this morning, our team did. The parents were no longer there. We're not sure what their status is. We've been trying to understand the relationship between the suspect and his parents, whether they might have known anything or should have known anything about his alleged plans, and the authorities just haven't said yet, Diane.
And Aaron, why do police believe the suspect intended to hit other targets after the supermarket?
It seems he laid it all out for them. I spoke this morning to the Buffalo Police Commissioner, Joseph Gramaglia, and he said that investigators had uncovered evidence to suggest that as bad as this was, with 10 people shot and killed, it could certainly have been worse. He said the gunman, had he not been forced to surrender by responding officers, would have driven out of this parking lot here, down Jefferson Avenue. He would have grabbed the pistol and the shotgun that were found in his car and opened fire on any random black person that he saw walking down the street. And he might have even stopped at another store to continue the massacre. Inside the car, he had plenty of ammunition. They found a number of high-capacity magazines.
So, Aaron, what are investigators focused on right now?
So there are a couple of avenues of investigation, continuing to look into all the electronic media to see what else they can possibly learn about this 18-year-old suspect, the name Peyton Gendron. They're also, though, looking at the parents, of course, but continuing to build a case. Federal investigators have said this involved not only hate crimes, but domestic terrorism, and federal prosecutors here in the Western District of New York are looking to bring those federal charges.
All right, Aaron Katersky in Buffalo, New York for us. Thanks, Aaron. And authorities say the suspect was investigated last June after threatening a shooting at his hometown's high school graduation. State police took him to a local hospital for a mental health evaluation, but no charges were ever filed. Let's bring in ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Brad Garrett for more on that part of this story. Brad, what options do law enforcement agencies have when they encounter someone who appears to be planning violence, but you don't know for sure?
It's very limited. I mean, the problem, Diane, is that you really need specific information. In other words, I'm going to go harm someone, something, etc. And so there are a lot of people, unfortunately, like this alleged shooter, where they fall into some extremist thinking, in this case, perhaps white supremacy. they start building up that they need to be empowered. They need to go harm somebody, in this case, minorities. And so what does law enforcement do? They pretty much did what they did on the front end and let it go. And that's where this always fails with mass shooters. There tends to be signs, but the problem is there's no follow-up. And there was no follow-up with him. I could start naming off mass shooters, Nicholas Cruz, et cetera, that all expressed views that they were going to harm something, but nobody ever really checked on them. And unfortunately, Diane, to be fair, the system's not set up to do that. I'm only suggesting is that's really the only way we're going to keep track of would-be mass shooters.
So, Brad, the suspect is believed to have written this racist, lengthy document fixated on the false replacement theory, this theory that white people are being replaced by people of color. Where does that idea even stem from, and how is it gaining traction?
It gains traction because you have TV personalities talking about it. You have politicians talking about it, maybe not directly, but in a very subtle way. This concern about people of color, whether they're minorities, whether they're of the Jewish faith, or in this case, perhaps African-American, that all of these people are against us being white folks. And it's driven online, as Aaron talked about, and it's very difficult to sort of head these people off. I think in short order, think of it this way. People who join cults, much of the same thinking, they get driven in one direction.
So, Brad, how do you counter that, particularly with authorities saying that the suspect in this case may have been encouraged online?
Well, I don't know that you can do a lot about that because there's just too much of it. There's not enough people, Diane, to keep track of what hateful things are said online. But you can look at individuals like this kid. Why didn't somebody a month later, 2 months later, check on him? Informal check. Take a mental health person, a cop, maybe an agent, and have a conversation with him. What are you thinking about? What have you been doing? Have you acquired any more guns? And we really need that sort of setup to get in front of these type of people. None of it's going to be perfect, but we clearly need to do better.
I think that's for sure. Brad Garrett, thank you as always. And the suspect in the Buffalo shooting is now facing a charge of first-degree murder, but pled not guilty in court yesterday. Criminal defense attorney and former homicide prosecutor Bernarda Villalona joins me now for more on this. Bernarda, thanks for being here. 10 people died in this shooting. So why is this suspect only facing one count of first-degree murder?
So it was a strategic decision. That's not going to be the final count. What happens is that when you take someone into custody, you have to have at least one count that you're holding them on. And this being a top count, murder in the first degree, is sufficient to hold him in custody without bail. Finally, on Thursday, there's going to be a felony hearing. In that felony hearing, the prosecutor is going to have to present evidence in order to show there's probable cause to hold this defendant in custody. And I believe it's at that time where the prosecutor is going to present the 10 counts of murder in the first degree, as well as the assault or attempted murder counts as to the 3 non-fatal victims.
Now, the victims, all of the victims who were killed in this case who are black, the Justice Department is calling this is a quote, a hate crime and act of racially motivated violent extremism. So how does that impact this case from a legal perspective?
Exactly. I see it as a racist massacre, what took place on Saturday. So in terms of how it's going to impact it, you have the federal government as well as the state government. The state government, as of now, is pursuing it as murder in the first degree. I'm looking forward to the federal government jumping in, because if the federal government is to bring charges of hate crime leading to death, guess what? It qualifies the case for the death penalty, because currently in New York, the death penalty has been abolished. So despite this man killing 10 people because of their race, the death penalty is not applicable in the state, but it is with the federal government.
And we heard both Brad and Aaron refer to that 180-page document, this sort of racist, rambling document referring to the Great Replacement theory, which we know is false. But how crucial will this all come into play once and if and when this case goes to trial?
So it's crucial in the sense of, number one, it goes to show you how meticulous this man was in the planning of this massacre. And two, it goes to show you what was in his mind when he decided to use that AR-15 15 and shoot at multiple people. And intent is very important when it comes to proving the charges, whether it's in the federal government or in the state government. Intent is going to play a crucial role, especially if you want to prove that it was a hate crime.
And you're talking about planning and intent. They're also saying that this suspect was dressed in military gear, that they found more high-capacity magazines in his car. So how important will that be? And could he face more charges based on these allegations that he planned to continue the shooting had he not been stopped?
Well, in the sense of the prosecutor is going to argue that in both the state as well as the government, in the federal government. But I will say this, those pieces of evidence go to show that if he decides to put his mental state that he wasn't able to form the intent because something was wrong with him, the prosecutor is going to point out to these pieces of evidence to go to show you how well aware he knew what he was doing. And there was nothing wrong with him in the sense of he was suffering from a mental defect.
All right, Bernarda Villalona, great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Lindsay Davis will anchor a special edition of ABC News Live Prime tonight from Buffalo, New York. Tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC News Live. Coming up, the latest on the baby formula crisis. Hear what the FDA commissioner is now saying about that when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. One person was killed and several injured in a mass shooting at a church in Southern California yesterday. Investigators say the shooter was taken down and tied up by church members until police arrived. The Swedish government is expected to follow its neighbor Finland in announcing plans to join NATO today. It comes as Ukraine's military retakes more territory from Russia. Ukrainian forces say they've pushed Russian troops out of the Kharkiv region, which includes Ukraine's second largest city. And Congress is set to take up 2 bills this week designed to ease the baby formula shortage. This comes as parents across the U.S. continue to struggle to find formula, especially low-income families who depend on government programs. ABC's Ariel Reshef has the latest.
As the formula shortage strains families nationwide, lawmakers in Washington vowing to take action to help resolve it.
We must do something as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible, and use caution for these babies.
The House working on 2 bills. The first, emergency funding to expedite the process for the U.S. to purchase formula from FDA-approved facilities abroad. The second, widening formula access under government programs. That help can't come soon enough for new parents from coast to coast.
It's hard. It's really hard. It's sad. It's scary. I mean, it's super scary. It's the only thing she can eat.
My husband's running to 3 or 4 different stores, just trying to find something.
An average 43% of formula varieties are unavailable nationwide. And 8 states plus D.C. have more than 50% of various kinds of formula out of stock.
We went from having our formula being sent to us every couple of weeks for pharmacy to scrambling and looking all over the place for it.
Mom Amy Dolan, who lives in Flanders, New Jersey, says she's faced a crisis finding the formula her baby Connor needs because of his milk protein allergy.
We've been actively looking all the time. Every night we lay in bed and we're checking what websites we can find and how much it's going to cost. People saw it as an opportunity to buy all this formula and, price gouge at parents who will pay anything.
The FDA now saying it is taking steps to dramatically improve supply in the U.S. in a matter of weeks. And one of the major companies now warning that this could last through the end of the year. In the meantime, many families are now taking to social media to alert one another when there's a restock of formula at pharmacies and grocery stores in their area. Diane?
All right, Ariel Reshef, thank you. And the FDA says it's likely Abbott Nutrition will resume operations at its Michigan plant within the next few weeks. Earlier on GMA, George Stephanopoulos spoke about the formula shortage with FDA Commissioner Dr. Robert Califf.
You tweeted about an announcement coming this week about how manufacturers and suppliers abroad may import their products into the U.S. What more can you tell us about that?
Sure, George. It's good to be with you and glad I can address this issue, which is of great concern to all of us at FDA. I'm a grandparent of 6 kids, one of whom is an infant formula kid, so well aware of what's needed. So we are moving on the product that was intended for other countries, and I anticipate that by the end of the day today, we'll have a detailed announcement about how that's possible. Remember that the instructions need to be in a language that can be understood by mothers and caregivers that are putting the formula together for these infants, and also we have to be able to test the formula to make sure that the 30 required constituents are actually there in the right amounts.
So nothing's going to be coming in that's not safe.
That's right. We're going to assure that the product is tested, that it's coming from reliable manufacturers, most of whom we know quite well already, and that we do the testing that's needed on the basis needed to assure that it's safe.
Abbott is saying it's going to take 10 weeks to get their factory in Sturgis, Michigan, which had to shut down, back up and running. Anything you can do to help them move that along more quickly?
We are working really closely with Abbott, and I expect that in a very short period of time, we're going to have an announcement about the path forward. I think we've figured out what to do. Abbott's recently indicated that as short as in 2 weeks, they can be in action and begin to do their part in getting supply back on the shelves. Of course, it takes longer to get in full motion. And George, I want to point out one of the examples that you gave in your show of an infant who has special needs. That is really of critical importance to us at FDA. We're looking at case by case to make sure that no infants go without the formula they need. We recognize it's difficult for parents and may take some time, but we'll get there in each individual case. That plant in Sturgis, Michigan was making a number of special formulas that are really life-saving for infants, and so we have a whole team that's doing nothing but working on making sure that that formula can get out even from that plant when it's going to be life-saving.
Some have suggested invoking the Defense Production Act to get more manufacturers up and running, speed this along.
I don't think we need the Defense Production Act. I think the manufacturers are ready to go, and they're going to increase their production. In fact, they already have. Importantly, there's been more formula bought, about 10% more in the last month than in the month before the recall. So there is formula out there. It's just not in the right place at the right time. So this issue of the supply chain and how it gets disrupted when a major manufacturer has to shut down a plant, you know, is a real lesson for all of us that we're working on rectifying, but it is taking just basic work to get the supply chain right.
Some parents in a desperate situation may move to make their own formula. Remind them why that's a bad idea.
That's a very bad idea because formula, as I said, has 30 constituents that have to be there in the right amount, 10 of which, if they're there too much, if there's too much of that constituent, can be dangerous. So formula for infants is a total substitute for breast milk, which God has, for reasons we don't know, made into a magnificent nutritional supplement. So we need the infant formula. It's critical for so many families, but it's got to be the right stuff.
Our thanks to the FDA Commissioner and George Stephanopoulos for that interview. Coming up, as the country mourns 1 million lives lost to COVID-19, we will speak with a key researcher about the development and authorization process for vaccines. Stay with us. Welcome back. As we mark the now more than 1 million's lives lost to COVID-19, we're getting a clearer picture of how doctors and scientists gave us our best weapon against the virus, the COVID vaccine. Now, researchers from the Commonwealth Fund estimate that the U.S. COVID-19 vaccine program has prevented as many as 2.2 million deaths. The Kaiser Family Foundation analysis also shows that since June of last year, at least 234,000 deaths could have been prevented had those patients been vaccinated. Let's bring in Dr. Paul Offit, the director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, for more on this. Dr. Offit, thank you for being here. I know you helped develop a rotavirus vaccine, and you were involved in the authorization process for the COVID-19 vaccine. So given vaccine hesitancy in this country right now, can you walk us through how intensive that development and authorization process is for vaccines?
Sure. Well, this is the fastest vaccine ever made. That's certainly true. We isolated and sequenced that virus, SARS-CoV-2 virus, in January of 2020. And 11 months later, we had 2 large-scale clinical trials, Pfizer and Moderna, of 40,000 and 30,000 people showing the vaccine worked and was safe. I mean, it's hard to make a vaccine much faster than that. And the reason was one thing, money. Operation Warp Speed, which put $11 billion into that program, essentially took the risk out of it for pharmaceutical companies. So normally you do sort of phase 1 trials, sort of dosing, dose ranging trials, then phase 2 trials where you look at hundreds of people, then phase 3 trials, which is tens of thousands of people. Then you you build the manufacturing plant, then you submit it for licensure. Those sorts were all compressed. I mean, the good news is, safety guidelines were still followed and nothing, was truncated or ignored. It was just a compressed process because you took the risk out of it for pharmaceutical companies. But I think that people looking at that would assume wrongly that meant that we had skipped critical steps or safety guidelines, and that didn't happen.
Now, the FDA recently announced it's limiting the authorized use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine after an investigation into reports of rare blood clots. Should those risks have been identified earlier in the authorization process, and do you worry about the impact on the public's confidence in vaccines?
Well, so this is a very rare risk, the blood clots associated with Johnson & Johnson vaccine, also seen with the AstraZeneca vaccine in the United Kingdom. But it's so rare. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be seen sort of before authorization or before licensure. It's the kind of thing that's only going to be seen, problem that's only going to be seen when the vaccine is in millions of people, not in tens of thousands. So I don't think there was anything there really pre-approval that said this was going to be a problem. This is true of, frankly, any medical innovation in the history of humankind. Invariably, there's a human price to pay. You always would like to believe that you can anticipate that human price, but it's often not possible. You could make the same argument for the mRNA vaccines as a very rare cause of, myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, which is fortunately transient and self-limited. That really isn't the case with the Johnson & Johnson, which can be associated with fatalities, although, again, very rare. I mean, you're talking about sort of 1 to 2 per million people, so extremely rare, but real. And if you have an alternative vaccine, as we do with the mRNA vaccines, that becomes the preferential vaccine. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine would only be used if you have no other way of getting an mRNA vaccine.
So what do you say to skeptics who might hear that and think, see, that's why I want to wait to get vaccinated?
No, I think it makes sense. I mean, the father of modern vaccines was a man named Maurice Hilleman. He did the primary research or development of 9 of the 14 vaccines we currently give to children today. He said it best. He said, quote, "I never breathe a sigh of relief until the first 3 million doses are out there." I can understand the hesitancy at the beginning, but now you have billions of people who've been vaccinated. I think everything you need to know about this vaccine, you now know. So I think the hesitancy doesn't make sense at this point.
Now, you talked about the speed with which these vaccines were developed. I know Pfizer and Moderna use messenger RNA, which works a little bit differently than some previous vaccines. Can you walk us through that and why that helped be such a game changer for vaccine technology?
Right. Normally, when you give a vaccine, you're trying to make an immune response to a particular protein. In this case, the spike protein, you give the protein in some form, whole killed virus, or just give the actual purified protein. Here, you actually give the gene that makes the protein, which was different. And so we've learned a lot about this technology, and it may be of value for other problems as well.
All right. Dr. Paul Offit, we appreciate your time today and your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our coverage of 1 million deaths continues throughout the day here on ABC News Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis right after this.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.